Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics leaders. It's my pleasure to welcome today's program, Mehmet Demirci, who is Senior VP of Global Solutions at E2Open. And today we're going to talk about mitigating supply side service risks with AI. So last September, we asked members of our Indago supply chain research community, who are all supply chain logistics professionals from manufacturing, retail, and distribution companies, is your company becoming more supply driven? A majority of the respondents, 58%, said that they had become more supply driven in response to the current market challenges. We've also seen a shift in people talking about from forecasting to sensing. So what is the difference between the two? What does supply sensing mean, and how does it, what benefits can it bring to companies that enable it? Well, those are some of the questions we're going to discuss in today's program, and it's great to have Mehmet on the program to share his insights and advice on the topic. So Mehmet, welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks for having me, Adrian. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to talk to you about some of these capabilities.
Great. Well, it's awesome to have you. We've had colleagues of yours there at E2Open throughout the years here on Talking Logistics. But you're a first-time guest here. And like I always like to do before we kind of dive into the topic, I'm always curious how people get involved with this crazy industry that we're in. So why don't you briefly tell us a little bit about your career path, how and why you got involved with supply chain logistics, and what your current role and responsibilities are there at E2Open?
Of course, Adrian. Again, a pleasure to be here today. So my whole career has really revolved around supply chain. I walked a path to ensure I saw supply chain almost like from all angles. And really, that was not by coincidence. It was intentional. It was because, number one, I always viewed supply chain as like the quarterback of an organization, connecting the dots, getting the stuff to the customer at the right place, right time, cost, quality. And secondly, coming from a very analytical background, the application of advanced analytics, optimization, AI, ML, into helping the world, supply chains, logistics flow more efficiently, it just always fascinated me. So I have an industrial engineering background with a PhD focusing on advanced optimization and operations research and such. So I was introduced to the world of supply chain and application of different AI, ML, and optimization techniques early on, and I fell in love. I never left the field. My career has taken me to roles in enterprise supply chain software companies, Big Four management consulting companies, which helped me learn about, design, implement some of the best practices, but also to the industry. That's what I mean by all angles. I also led global supply chains. I was the global head of supply chain and logistics for example, a global industrial manufacturing company. With my passion for technology-driven transformation, I now lead global solutions at E2Open. Basically, what that entails is I lead our global pre-sales consulting capabilities, gaining our clients' trust in solving complex problems, demonstrating what we can do, and also solution enablement within the company to ensure we have repeatable, scalable processes for our team as they partner with clients.
Yeah, no, great background. And certainly, the area of data analytics, machine learning, AI, all those things that are part of your background are something that has become even more critically important today than it was certainly 23 years ago when I first started in the industry. Nobody talked about data science, back then.
Right.
Everyone talked about how logistics, supply chain was a cost center. It was not strategic for a lot of companies. And I think the good news is that, boy, has that changed, and I think it, certainly the last couple of years has really opened the eyes, particularly for many CEOs and CFOs, those that hadn't already understood and recognized the value and importance of supply chain management. They certainly got the message over the past 2 years. And,
Exactly.
With the wealth of data and, that's being generated in this industry and the opportunities for improvement, if you're able to really, truly tap that data intelligently, I think, offers a lot of promise for the industry. So, and then of course, having worked in the front lines of this, on the other side, provides you with some great insights and perspective as well. So let's get into the topic now. I think that it seems like a lot of supply chain planners, these days are talking about sensing, just as much, if not more than, forecasting, these days. So I guess the first question is, what's the difference, between the two, and why is it important to understand that difference?
A great question, Adrian. Now, let's face it, forecasting is important. It enables a business to plan what they expect the future to look like and align the resources accordingly. And it's actually an important input to many processes that are important to the health of an organization: S&OP, financial plans, inventory, supply, capacity, purchasing plans, so on and so forth. Forecasting typically tries to predict future by using historical patterns, a little bit more aggregate, a little bit more longer term, typically 6 months, 2 years. And even companies that claim we don't forecast, we're completely demand driven and stuff like that, they actually have some level of forecasting in the background. It might be buried in the logic of how they set inventory targets or buffer levels and buffer zones, but there is some sort of expectation of what they're going to sell. But despite the importance of it, there's a universal fact about forecasts, which is they're pretty much always wrong. But and this was especially felt around the globe, just like you said, in the past 2+ years. Everything you could imagine could go wrong did. Murphy's Law was proven, and the world was swimming in supply constraints, demand trend changes that are sometimes permanent and wild swings, and so on and so forth. Now, the realities at the time when plans are actually executed are different than when they were forecasted. And simply put, sensing monitors the supply chain, the whole network with real-time signals, and helps update and tweak those plans. It senses what is going on with the most recent information. To do this, it uses AI technology to understand and learn from the trends across a multitude of signals, in addition to just looking at past patterns. One of the more commonly understood concepts here is demand sensing. I think that's fairly well known because it was introduced more than a decade ago and has been providing a lot of value to the field. Now, demand sensing can use things like point of sales data, retailer inventory, weather, social sentiment, current orders, channel promotions, so on and so forth, to predict how market changes will impact demand. Again, artificial intelligence comes into play, provides insight, scalability, automation, and this historically has significantly improved the forecast compared to what somebody would be able to do through traditional demand planning kind of strategies. And it helps enable a sense and respond strategy, not just kind of plan and wish for the best, but also sense and respond quickly in an automated fashion. And now more than ever, like, this is very clear that it's an important need for the supply chain. And why is understanding the difference important? Because these are related concepts, but in a way they serve different purposes, right? Just like I said, forecasting helps align resources to what the future would look like, so they're not just kind of walking blind, and helps midterm sales and operations plans, for example. So people are looking at like one plan to at least guide the company for. Sensing fine-tunes that plan at a very granular level automatically, and more tying it closer to execution and enabling a robust sales operations execution process. Because without sensing, you forecast with some maybe simplified assumptions, so on and so forth, let the real world unfold, and then you scramble around to make ends meet. With sensing, you get some proactive warning and automatic adjustments to kind of make that plan work and understand if you need to prioritize something. And now we have a newer capability, supply sensing, which takes this a step further, gives companies the ability to kind of keep the finger on the pulse. Are there disruptions coming? What is the impact? What should we do about them?
Yeah, no, that's a great, great overview. I mean, I think some people might think that, sensing replaces forecasting, but that's not the case. I mean, the two are really complementary because, there's that classic saying, right? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So you need some kind of a plan, some kind of a forecast, again, to provide at least some framework, to work towards. But what has historically been missing or has been difficult to get is, that sensing aspect of it to more intelligently, more proactively respond to the inevitable, changes and exceptions that are going to occur to that plan. So I think that was a key takeaway from what you said for me, is that, they're complementary, and it's the two together that really, provide the biggest value. You talked a little bit about, demand sensing, and you're right. I mean, I think that's been a topic that, folks have talked about, for quite some time. I think supply sensing is relatively new, at least to me. I mean, I think I haven't seen as much talked about that. So why don't you, tell us a little bit more about that? I mean, what is it? And, more importantly, how does it work?
Right. And hey, don't feel bad, Adrian. You're not alone. Supply sensing is a very new concept. I don't think many people have heard of it. And I'm very excited to talk about it with you today. Before I get to what it is, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about why it was introduced, why it was needed. I guess with the current climate of supply chain, I think people guess why it was needed. But some of the biggest issues, as you also mentioned, are supply chains became more supply driven now. Like, what can we do? What can we get out there? Sometimes we don't have what the customer wants, but like, how can we navigate? Right? There's just a lot of disruptions and climate, geopolitical, healthcare crisis. So it's just become a bit of a mess. Actually, supply chain now is a common term we hear on the news, and neighbors talk about it. Before that, people were like, "You're in supply chain? What do you do?" Now everybody's like, "Why are the shelves bare and this and that?" And you're in supply chain, right? And I'm like, "Yeah." Now, and also it's at the kind of the radar. It's on the radar for CEOs. It's one of their top 3 priorities to improve upon, according to one of the Gartner executive surveys that showed that the number of CEOs who regard supply issues as something to solve among the top 3 priorities they have to deal with, going up by 75% compared to just 2 years ago. And same survey found out that 70% of supply chain leaders today are actually working on events that they were not prepared for. So now that tells you something, because with this increased level of volatility, it's very hard for companies to ensure flow of supply across the network, and most importantly to the customer. In fact, we have an inventory forecast benchmark study that we publish every year. For the first time in history, that study showed last year, overall, customer service levels across industries went down. That's usually a metric that trends up and up, but that for the first time in history, in our tracking and publishing the report, went down. But that puts brand loyalty and customer experience at risk, which has, revenue loss type components, not to mention the costs you incur trying to prevent and expedite and mitigate and so on and so forth. Now, supply planning is a capability that is well understood, and it is very valuable. It helps companies, again, plan how they can best fulfill the world as they see it. But there are some issues. Number one, it is reactive. It's at the mercy of the master data planning parameters that govern it. Number two, it views the world as deterministic, meaning assumes the world will behave as forecasted. So it says, it's basically arithmetic calculations. This is how much inventory you have. This is what you plan to sell. This is what's coming. That plus that minus that, here's the inventory you're expected to have this week. Well, what if the demand is way higher? What if I don't get what I wanted? It's short shipped or it's late, and 1,000 other questions, right? So we need to complement supply planning as well with a sense and respond capability on the supply side, where AI monitors, learns, and understands what could go wrong, helps project supply reliability and its consequences. And if I can summarize what supply sensing does in 4 major bullet points, I would say, number one, it understands the variability and disruption risk in the network, constantly monitoring, looking at transactions, the network structure, demand, supply, transit, production, what was requested, what was committed, what was delivered, what is the real world looking like. It learns from these and proactively analyzes supply paths to understand if there's going to be any disruption. Without action, what would it look like? When would we recover? So on and so forth. And also, one of the strong elements of this is this doesn't have to be just within the enterprise. It could look at the multi-enterprise, suppliers, channel partners as well. And no, you don't need data scientists kind of sitting down and mapping everything and so on and so forth. It will plug into your ERP and transactional systems to kind of figure things out. Number two, it projects the confidence around getting the right supply at the right time. Basically, it effectively enables probabilistic planning. It monitors deliveries from nodes of the network and from a quantity and timing perspective, learning from historical recent performance combined with the real-time signals and trends. And it projects the likelihood of getting the planned supply at the right time at the right quantity. Is it going to be late? Are we going to be short shipped? For how long? It builds kind of supplier manufacturing or transit lane risk profiles that really kind of enable you on proactive resolution and having a realistic approach to what will happen. Number three, it also projects and converts these into service level projections across the network. Things are short, things are happening, but what happens to what the customer sees? Because that's the most important, right? Service level is a key metric for supply chains. Customer service level usually is one of the top metrics for companies because it really marries supply chain to customer experience and revenue and so on and so forth. And these metrics are very easy to monitor historically, almost impossible to project confidently into the future. So, but supply sensing can do this automatically. And number four, it also proactively recommends actions, gives the ability to analyze, understand if something can be mitigated or how best to deal with it, because sometimes things are just a bit unavoidable. Do we need to bring in more? Do we need to order earlier? Do we need to update our planning parameters so planning knows that the lead times have just extended and we can't just wish and pray anymore? And something you said at the beginning, right? Being supply driven. Well, what if we only get X% of what we needed? How do we best allocate? How do we make the right stuff that kind of marries up with what people want? So again, AI at work for insight, scalability, and automation, but from a supply and service side perspective.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of great points there. I mean, a lot to unpack there. I mean, I like that last point because it is not just about sensing and seeing and understanding. You ultimately have to take some action on kind of what the data is showing you, what the output is. And so I like that one of those components is the fact that there's some recommended actions, right, to take. Do you shift your manufacturing plan or what you decide to manufacture this week based on what's coming in? Do you move product from one location to another, so on and so forth. So I think that's a key, element of this. I think, similarly, I mean, when we talk to our Indago supply chain research community, resilience was a key priority for them when we asked them, what are some of the biggest, and, what are you doing to increase your resilience? The top two of the top three things were supply related, right? They want to develop stronger, more transparent relationships with their suppliers. And, they wanted to extend their supplier base, right? So diversify, more, which I think all plays into, what you just talked about right now. And I think from a supply standpoint, we obviously all the congestion at the ports was a key factor in that, as well as all the COVID shutdowns in China, which continue to this day. So I think having that visibility and that data to understand, okay, what does it mean now, in terms of what is the actual throughput time through the ports in different ports, and what is the actual manufacturing capacity or run rate at our suppliers to understand if they're ever going to fulfill our orders or if they're going to short ship and so forth. Having early visibility and understanding and data around that is what then creates that ripple effect, right?
Exactly, spot on.
So can you share some examples of supply sensing in action? I mean, in other words, can you share some customer use cases?
Oh, absolutely. Here are a few interesting use cases that kind of are different parts of the supply chain and the spectrum, I would say. For a major electronics manufacturing company, the focus is on predicting supply shortages and projecting supply of parts from tier 2 component manufacturers at different confidence levels, 90%, 95%, 98%. So this company needed to make longer term customer demand commitments and revenue plans in a very competitive market. But the issue was the many critical tier 2 component suppliers only provided near-term commitments. They had a lot going on in their supply chains. So the company had to make unsupported customer revenue commitments that, beyond the near-term horizon, started feeling a bit out of whack and eroded customer trust. So for the past 2+ years, like several manufacturers, getting materials in place is hard. So this prevented them from reliably hitting their demand commitments. And now they're able to use supply sensing AI to automatically learn and predict tier 2 component supply with probabilistic kind of confidence levels. They then run supply planning scenarios to assess, kind of marry up 90, 95, 98% confident what is coming. How do we best commit to customers? How do we marry up to what the customer wants? And what would our revenue projections be? Now, this helps them with obviously much more reliable demand and financial projections, and helps them navigate the supply disruptions, and so that they can have their tier one ODMs really geared toward supplying the right material to marry up with customer demand, being more confident of what supply they can rely on. Very interesting use case, actually. I hadn't thought about the problem this way till we started working on it. And for a high-tech company, their focus was on streamlining the process of aligning with the supply base on any supply shortages, their impact, and how they would be impacted in terms of their customer service levels for different channels. Now, they collaborate with their suppliers openly, and they were using a supplier ticketing system for shortages that occur within the lead time. Fair enough, very useful. But as the world started going crazy and supply shortages started exploding, this just became a process of just an unbelievable amount of tickets with imminent issues. It was just very hard to manage and react and try to mitigate anything. Now, with supply sensing, AI helps them look farther out, not just like within lead time. It just looks at a broader horizon. Again, understanding what could go wrong without any action. When would we recover? What could the potential actions be? It really streamlines this process to communicate with the suppliers. And remember, it ties it to customer service level. So it's automatically prioritized. Maybe something is short, but you're like, oh, well, 2 weeks, I can stomach that. Oh my gosh, that component is going to tank my customer service level to 85. Let me focus on that. That became obviously a big efficiency for them. And then for a major CPG company, their focus, they're in a cutthroat industry. Their focus was, I want to project and protect my customer service levels. And they were able to look at service level actually in two dimensions. One, their own service level for the channel partners, the retailers that buy from them. But also number two, trying to predict the supply reliability out of the retailers to the end consumer, extended supply chain downstream. Now, they monitor and collaborate with their retailers on demand, inventory trends in the channel, and so on and so forth. But now with sensing also, they have their, again, finger on the pulse. They can rapidly reprioritize, see issues coming, and rebalance inventory, maybe change manufacturing or some sort of supply pull. Before this capability, they were very dependent on looking at what is going to be, what am I going to fall short of within the lead time? How can I react? But again, that's too expensive, that's too late. When you look farther out ahead, in the world of supply chain, you gain time and things get just cheaper to solve, just more cost effective to solve. And these companies also use supply sensing information to clean up their planning parameters and master data so things are just in sync.
So those are all great examples. And going back to the first example you talked about with the tier two suppliers, I mean, are they directly connected? I mean, because one of the areas where a lot of companies have poor visibility or understanding is they have good relationships and good integration, let's say, with their tier one suppliers, but the moment it gets past tier one, they really have very little or limited data or understanding of what happens further upstream. Mm-hmm. In that case that you talked about, do they have direct relationships or integrations and data, being able to pull data from those tier two and beyond suppliers?
In this case, they do have the major tier two suppliers integrated, and some of the smaller ones, interact through email or kind of file exchanges. But here's the beauty of it. That obviously is forget about supply sensing. That's just a very good way to do business anyway, because supply chain is connected. And and by the way, the issues usually go wrong outside of your four walls. So the opening up enterprises to talk to each other is just definitely where the world is heading toward. And I think the pandemic really showed us how important that is. But even if the customer doesn't have direct connectivity to tier two, they can still utilize supply sensing because tier one is communicating and they know the orders and the responses and so on and so forth. So there's still intelligence to add. But if there's direct connectivity and purchase order, inventory collaboration, forecast commits, and processes around that, it just becomes richer and more value adding.
Yeah, absolutely. So ultimately, I mean, what is the business case for supply sensing? I mean, what benefits can companies achieve by enabling? I mean, you already talked about, and I think it's a great point, linking supply sensing with customer experience and customer satisfaction and
Mhm.
customer experience. I assume that's one benefit there for companies that, particularly where that's becoming a major competitive differentiator of this thing, competing on customer experience and customer satisfaction. But I assume that there are other, benefits and financial benefits as well.
You're spot on, and that's always what I count number one. Helps companies improve service levels, reduce lost sales, and again, even during times of supply constraints and disruptions, where taking a hit on customer service is just unavoidable, it helps you not drop as much, still control it, and get the right things at the right place. It helps them more reliably commit to demand and allocate in a more collaborative, profitable kind of way, understanding the likelihood of what supply you can bank on and what's demand doing, and so on and so forth. It also helps them with better inventory control, because you can better predict supply, so you can put the right inventory, build the right inventory. And although I should mention this, although I'm focusing on supply shortages and gaps due to very obvious reasons, supply sensing will also show where you might have excess, because it links everything to service, right? So I find this very useful because it will show you, hey, you're short here, but over here, you're well above your service targets. And then it helps with proactive excess and obsolete kind of mitigation, but also being able to redeploy without analysis paralysis, because it's just there. It automatically tells you where you're overstocked. Um, Expedite costs obviously go down since you have more time to resolve issues, and you sync up the planning parameters, really getting closer to a sense and response strategy. But Adrian, if I may, I want to tell a personal story that really hits home for me. In the recent past, if we rewind the tape a little bit, when I was the global head of supply chain and logistics for a major global industrial manufacturing company, I was a participant in a monthly leadership meeting with the executive board. And I was responsible to report on the number one metric of the company, number one, on-time delivery performance to customers. This was during times of major disruption. The transit networks were clogged, and a few internal sites were also having issues, just performance issues. And a few suppliers were really struggling with shutdowns and some quality issues they were experiencing, and so on and so forth. So I would show them, the executive board of the company, the recent performance, and without any issue, right? That's easy to calculate. And I would say something like, hey, we're X% below target, driven by this and this and this. We're focusing on these strategies. I think we're going to improve, and blah, blah, blah. And then the much dreaded question would come: Mehmet, where do you think our customer service level will be next month, next quarter? When are we going to recover? Now, that's nearly impossible to very confidently answer. So me and my teams, we had simple assumptions, some modeling, gut feel, and I would say, yeah, we're going to improve by a percentage point, and so on and so forth. But now imagine having AI help you with that. And it's very common for supply chain leaders to be in a position like that. And it's very common for customer service level and experience to be featured in SNOP executive reviews or monthly leadership forums, and so on and so forth. Just imagine the power of being able to say, hey, we're 2% below. Looks like we have bumpy road ahead. It'll probably take 2 quarters for us to get out of this. And here are the gaps. Here's what we should be talking about. That's just an unbelievable competitive advantage.
Yeah, that's a great story. I mean, it reminds me of the famous Deming quote, in God we trust, all others bring data. So I think one of the positives of the pandemic is that CEOs, CFOs have become much more aware of supply chain and its role and importance. But on the negative side, particularly for leaders like yourself, you're going to get those hard questions now more often. And it's one thing to answer them based on gut feel or assumptions or looking back on just some past history, but it's much more powerful way to answer that when you actually have some data, some insights and statistics, something that you can you can model and demonstrate to the leadership team, and with some level of confidence. It may not be 100% confidence, but it's better
Exactly.
than just guessing or pulling stuff out of the air. So we're running short on time here, so I'm just going to go right to the last question here. So as a way to wrap up, I mean, how can companies get started, with supply sensing, and what are some important factors or capabilities to consider?
Great question. Actually, if you're currently running a functioning supply chain, you already have quite a bit of the data that you would need to start supply sensing. because the system will automatically build your network, understand the master data, transaction data, and start building demand, supply, transit, so on and so forth patterns. Now, where to start and what supply sensing should focus on, it really depends on some of the pressing issues you're facing. The listeners will notice the use cases I brought up were just a little bit different. They were focusing on certain things that were important to each company. For example, do you have customer service level issues with high penalties, high lost sales, unreliable delivery that is hurting the brand? Do you have unreliable suppliers or transportation lanes where you can't trust your production plan? You just have to break into the schedule all the time. Do you have certain internal manufacturing sites that are just not performing and creating a chain of events where internally you're becoming unpredictable? Or are you more worried about the end consumer and the retailers not having enough and not managing their end appropriately, and maybe you're not aligned, maybe all of the above? So the answers to these questions will help guide us where and how this capability will come into play. But ultimately, real-time visibility and connectivity with upstream and downstream partners this is only increasing in importance across supply chains. The access to multi-enterprise network elements make not only supply sensing, but just supply planning, execution much more effective. But it's more than just the access, it's the ability to analyze and even automate the responses. And for example, a platform where you can connect supply chains across enterprises, bring data together from these disparate systems, providing access to real-time data that is cleansed and converted to decision grade, and fed into AI-enabled planning, sensing, collaboration technologies, that becomes really kind of the future go-to.
Yeah, no, I've been a big proponent of network-based platforms, where you bring together this connectivity of trading partners together on a common platform. And I think, again, 23 years ago, this was very difficult to do, right? Because if you had 100 suppliers, and a lot of companies have way more than 100 suppliers, but if you had 100 suppliers, you had to make 100 different connections, and it was 100 different EDI connections. And then, of course, your supply base is constantly changing. So, it's a never-ending, project. And fast forward to today with the more modern technologies, with APIs and web services and mobile technologies and sensors, actual physical sensors that are out there transmitting data, and the emergence of these network-based platforms, where you've got literally thousands and tens of thousands of trading partners connected together, certainly facilitates that sharing and collaboration, sharing of data and the ability to collaborate on these processes. Well, Mehmet, I think you provide a great foundation for understanding what supply sensing is and how to get started. And I'm sure there's going to be a topic that's going to continue to be on the forefront of supply chain leaders, because it's something that the disruptions are still there, and this continues to be a very volatile and uncertain environment. So, again, thank you for making the time to be in the program and sharing your insights and advice on this topic.
Thank you so much for having me, Adrian. I really enjoyed it, and I hope to be back on the program soon.
Absolutely. We'll love to have you back. And I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the E2Open website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Mehmet, you can post it there, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.